the practice of prayer. Every convert should learn by heart the Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Glory Be, the Apostles' Creed, the Confiteor, and the acts of faith, hope, charity, and contrition. The Catholic Church insists that her children must in some measure combine prayer with daily life, however busy the latter may be. Thus, she teaches them to begin the day with prayer, especially with the morning offering, by which every thought, word, and deed of the forthcoming day is offered to Jesus through Mary and thus becomes a prayer. In the morning, God's blessing should be asked on the day that is beginning and a promise made to do all well for His sake. If possible, Mass should be heard and Holy Communion received. During the day, the mind should be raised to God through ejaculatory prayer. At night, one's conscience should be examined, contrition and amendment expressed, God thanked for His favors, and His blessing asked against temptation. Suitable forms of morning and night prayers will be found in any Catholic prayer book. It is surely fitting that we should begin the day by addressing ourselves to God. Later we shall talk to many of our fellow men. Let us speak to God first. Deliberate omission of morning prayers is rather like telling God we do not need His help, that we can manage quite well without Him, and that He can safely leave us to ourselves. Why should we be surprised, then, if God does leave us to ourselves, with disastrous results? It is equally fitting that our last thought before retiring to rest should be of Him who is ever watching over us and into whose keeping we entrust ourselves when we sleep. There is an obligation to pray when interior faith, hope, and charity oblige us to do so. On coming to the use of reason, in evident danger of death, and frequently during life. Circumstances may oblige us to pray in time of temptation, which would otherwise be difficult to overcome. As for instance, when duty demands that we go into a proximate occasion of sin. Also, when some duty is to be fulfilled which requires prayer, such as receiving a sacrament or hearing Mass, in time of great personal or public necessity, and when charity to others demands it. It is fitting that we should pray morning and evening, before and after meals, plus extra on Sundays and holy days. What is prayer? Prayer is a lifting up of the mind and heart to God. That is the essence of prayer. This simple definition explains much about prayer. For instance, how, when, and why shall I pray? One might as well ask, how, when, and why shall I converse with my best friend, who is infinitely good and rich and powerful, while I am sinful and poor and powerless? No one needs elaborate instruction on such points as these. The heart of a man, his natural instinct, tells him how and when and why to speak when dealing with his friend. It is the same when dealing with God. Prayer is divided into two main categories, vocal prayer and mental prayer. Vocal prayer. Vocal prayer expresses in words the thoughts of the mind, the sentiments of the heart, the aspirations of the will. The vocal element is not the chief one. The words are but a vehicle, less important than what is conveyed through them. Each prayer is useful insofar as it lifts up the mind and heart to God. Thus, the value of any particular form of vocal prayer depends on how it works for the individual who uses it. It may have worked for the saint who composed it centuries ago, but it may not work for a working man in the 20th century. The test is this: does it raise the mind and heart to God? When we come to select our prayers, there is an almost numberless variety of printed prayers. Some have, quite obviously, special power to remind us of stirring things, to awaken fervor, to move the will, e.g., the divinely taught Our Father, the Hail Mary, acts of faith, hope, and charity, etc. But these are only a few. The Missal and Breviary are full of prayers. There are even many in the Bible, in both the Old and New Testaments. Many well-known prayers have come down to us through centuries of pious usage. Every prayer book contains a multitude of prayers for many occasions and circumstances, but they all possess value to the extent that they help us to lift up mind and will to God. If it works well for me, it is good for me. We should not undervalue homemade prayers. Sometimes people who cannot pray have written down what they would really like to say to God in time of prayer. This is really helpful. No one should hesitate about expressing himself to God in his own words. "I cannot pray. I wish I could," says someone. All he needs to do is to tell that to God, and he's praying. Another way of helping ourselves to pray is to take some favorite prayer and repeat the words slowly, dwelling on each as long as it yields appropriate meanings, comparisons, relish, and consolation. Then we pass on to the next word, continuing in like manner. Father C.C. Martindale, S.J., does something like this in his useful book, Words of the Missal. Nor must we forget the value of aspirations. The monks of the desert preferred to make their prayers short and frequent rather than long. There are hundreds of ejaculations which help to raise the mind and heart to God almost in an instant.